Since launching his campaign, Bush has gone from frontrunner to the middle of the pack. Now he seems to be regaining his momentum. We traveled to his home base in Florida to catch up with him. Jeb Bush took us to a park in the Little Havana section of Miami, where people who fled Cuba decades ago come to play their traditional game of dominoes.
¿Quién está ganando?
They greeted him like an old friend, conversing comfortably in their native language, which has become an issue in this campaign. On the one hand, they speak Spanish, but they're good assimilated Americans, too.
Well, it's American life. The first generation comes, they sacrifice for their children, and their children end up becoming as American as anybody else. Sería importante. Gracias.
Then we went to a Bush field office to discuss a campaign that has been much tougher for the former governor than many expected. Let's start with some news. You made some comments late this week that stirred up some controversy about how Republicans should reach out to African-American voters.
Our message is one of hope and aspiration. It isn't one of division and get in line and we'll take care of you with free stuff.
People are comparing that to what Mitt Romney said in 2012 about free stuff. And the implication that they're drawing is that you think all some people want is government handouts.
No, to the contrary. I think we need to make our case to African-American voters and all voters that an aspirational message fixing a few big complex things will allow people to rise up. That's what people want. They don't want free stuff. That was my whole point. You know, the left argues all the time, taking things out of context. What we've had, 6 million more people are in poverty today than the day that Barack Obama got elected president. 6 million more people. $2,000 less dollars in Americans' families in disposable income. This idea that you can regulate and tax and spin your way to prosperity has failed. We spend $1 trillion a year on poverty programs, and the net result is the percentage of people in poverty has remained the same. We should try something different, which is to give people the capacity to achieve earned success, fix our schools, fix our economy, lessen the crime rates in the big urban areas, and I think people in poverty can be lifted up.
Why now, Mr. Speaker?
John Boehner is stepping down as Speaker of the House. Is that a good or bad thing for conservatives?
Well, we'll see how it plays out. I think what we need is a conservative president that can work with the Congress. We wouldn't have these problems if you had a president that actually would commit to passing a budget, would commit to repealing Obamacare, reforming our taxes.
But
right
respectfully,
now,
sir, what about Boehner stepping down?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. I admire John Boehner greatly. He's a great public servant. He left at the apex of his time in service to the country with the Pope speaking in Congress. I think people are going to miss him in the long run because he's a person that is focused on solving problems.
Let's talk about where you stand in this race. You're now running fourth nationally with almost 10%, down from July when you were leading with almost 18%. In New Hampshire, which most consider your strongest of the early primaries, you're now fifth at 7%, down from a lead of 17% in April. I know you say, and I know you're going to say now, it's a marathon, but why do you think you've fallen back?
Look, it is a marathon, and we just started advertising. I'm confident we get good response. We got a great ground game in these early states. I'm confident I can win New Hampshire for sure. I'm going to work really hard at it. And once people see the proposals we put out in terms of taxes and regulation, an energy proposal that's going to come out in a couple of days, all these things I think give people a sense that things can get better for this country. And then I tell the Jeb story, which is a story of accomplishment here in Florida, where we cut taxes, reduced the size of government, reformed the things that really were important for people in the state. We led the nation in job growth 7 out of 8 years. All of that story is important to tell as well.
But we need Jeb to build a wall.
I was sitting right across from you in the Fox debate, and as Donald Trump was talking, I could see you sometimes shaking your head like, I can't believe I'm losing to this guy. But recently, starting with the second debate, you've become more assertive, more aggressive, and my question is, do you think in some way Trump is making you a better candidate because he's making you fight harder?
Campaigns are about getting better each and every day. Whether it's Donald Trump or you or anybody else, candidates have to get better, and that's what I intend to do. But I'm running a hard campaign, running with heart, and we're making great progress. These polls really don't matter. They don't filter out the people that aren't going to vote. It's just, I know it's an obsession because it kind of frames the debate for people for that week, but I'm in it for the long haul.
You've also evolved when it comes to your family. Early on, you talked a lot about yourself and distancing yourself in terms of your identity from your families, and that seems to have evolved.
I'm my own man, and my views are shaped by my own thinking and my own experiences.
I am a Bush. I happen to see two really good presidents develop relationships with other candidates.
Governor, question, why the change?
It isn't a change. It's not a contradiction to say that I'm my own man. I have a record of accomplishment. People look at Florida during my tenure, and most people say that it is the most conservative, reform-minded record in the last generation of time. I got to go tell that story, and I'm proud of being George H.W. Bush's son, and I'm certainly proud of my brother. I don't find it a contradiction at all. There are parts of my brother's tenure and my dad's tenure that I'm extraordinarily proud of, and foreign policy would be part of that. The problem today is we have a president who doesn't believe America's presence and leadership in the world is working. That's what I'm posting up against. It's the failed policies of the Obama, Clinton, Kerry foreign policy that is creating a really unstable and dangerous world.
You have put out a detailed tax plan, and let's drill down. You want 3 tax brackets, 10, 25, and 28%, a cap on tax deductions, except for charity at 2% of gross income, lower the top corporate rate from 35 to 20%, almost double the standard deduction. Briefly, what's the thinking?
The thinking is we need to create high sustained economic growth to lift people out of poverty and to give people a pay raise for the first time in a long while. So reducing the corporate tax rate and fully expensing capital investment will create a renaissance of investment in our own country, on Main Street, in the real economy, and that's what we need to be focused on. And lowering rates for people to give them more money in their pockets is a great idea. Look, we'll curb government spending, but the dynamic effect of higher growth will generate far more revenue than any of the most exotic tax plans that are being proposed on the left. I mean, Bernie Sanders has proposed $19 trillion of new spending over 10 years, and it's September of the year before the election. Hillary Clinton has already proposed higher taxes and more spending and regulation. I think we need to move in the different direction, which is limit government's power and shift power away from Washington, and cutting taxes has the dual benefit of increased economic activity and also shifting power back to our communities.
There are 2 major criticisms of your tax plan so far. First of all, the argument that, and you gave your tax plan to 4 conservative economists who said that it would increase the deficit between $1 and $3 trillion over the next 10 years. Now, Ronald Reagan proposed something roughly similar, big tax cuts back in 1980, and he argued that the dynamic effect, the word you used, would be that the growth would end up paying for the revenue loss. You know what your dad called that. Is this your version of voodoo economics?
No, look, the dynamic effect of tax policy that creates economic growth narrows the deficit that you're describing. But first of all, it's not the government's money. It's people's money, and if we can allow people to have more money, clearly that's going to create economic growth. But we're also going to have to fix the regulatory mess in Washington, D.C., embrace the energy revolution in our midst, and have a commitment to reduce the growth of spending, which ultimately means we have to preserve and protect entitlements for those that have it, but fix it going over the long haul.
But whether it was Ronald Reagan's tax cuts or your brother's tax cuts, they did add greatly to the deficit.
They didn't add as greatly as the static thinkers on the left think. They created a dynamic effect of high growth. And that's what we need. If we think that if people think 2% growth is okay, then we'll have more people living in poverty, and disposable income for the middle class will continue to decline. We have to jumpstart the economy so that people can have more money to make decisions for themselves.
Then there's another complaint, and that is the issue of who benefits. The Tax Foundation says the middle class would see after-tax income increase 2.9%, but the top 1% would get a boost of 11.6%. An analysis of your tax returns the last 6 years, which you have released to the public, the last 6 years indicates that you would save under your tax plan $3 million. Does Jeb Bush need a $3 million tax cut?
Look, the benefit of this goes disproportionately to the middle class. If you look at what the middle class pays today compared to what they would pay on our tax
But they get a 2.9% increase in after-tax income.
Because higher income people pay more taxes right now, and proportionally, everybody will get a benefit, but proportionally they'll pay more with my plan than what they pay today.
Well, I mean, forgive me, sir, but 2.9 seems like it's less than 11.6.
The simple fact is 1% of people pay 40% of all the taxes. And so, of course, tax cuts for everybody is going to generate more for people that are paying a lot more. I mean, that's just the way it is.
In the time we have left, let's do a lightning round. Quick questions, quick answers. You say the next president should defund Planned Parenthood. When you say the next president, does that mean that you're against a conceivable government shutdown in order to force this president?
I'm against a government shutdown. That's not what how democracy works.
What about the argument that, hey, look, this is what we need to do to stand up for principle?
It would be great. And I defunded Planned Parenthood when I was governor. And I think it's abhorrent that 330 or 40,000 abortions take place through these clinics. I'm a pro-life governor, and I'd be a pro-life president. But it will have no effect on funding for Planned Parenthood. That's the problem in Washington right now. It's so dysfunctional that that's considered a victory. Continue to fund for Planned Parenthood, shut down the government, and then cost the taxpayers more. Better to elect a conservative president that will pledge to do it and work with Congress.
In your 2013 book on immigration, you say that a enforce the border first policy is, in your words, self-defeating, that you're going to need a path to legalization as part of a compromise if you're going to get anything through Congress. Is that still your position?
I think you can do both, but the first step is to prove that the border is secure. I mean, you can have a conversation about comprehensive reform while you're doing your job. This president committed to comprehensive reform and has done nothing, and he hasn't enforced the border to the satisfaction of anybody that's looked at this issue.
Finally, Governor, you're coming out with a new energy plan this next week. How about a headline?
I think we ought to be all in on energy. We need to create a North American energy strategy, which means approve the XL pipeline, allow for the export of crude, dramatically improve the licensing of LNG plants, liquefied natural gas, but it's more difficult to do. Expand the possibilities of leasing on federal lands and waters, particularly where states have an interest in doing so. There's a lot that we can do to create high growth for our economy, lower utility prices, and I'm totally in on this, and I think the American people are as well.
Governor, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Good
for coming to Miami.
Let's continue the conversation.
You bet.